Harris, Trump, Kennedy. We're going to break down their body language and tell you what we see. Greg, tell us about the videos we're going to watch.
Last week, there were 3 interviews, 2 by Dr. Phil and 1 by Dana Bash. So we're going to look at not hard-hitting interviews, but more of an interview from a trust point of view and asking questions and getting how these candidates react. We're going to circle those. So whoever goes first in the first one will go last in the second one, and then so on and so on. So everybody gets a chance to go first.
Generally speaking, how should voters look at some of the changes that you've made, that you've explained some of here in your policy? Is it because you have more experience now and you've learned more about the information? Is it because you were running for president in a Democratic primary? And should they feel comfortable and confident that what you're saying now is going to be your policy moving forward?
Dana, I think the most important and most significant aspect of my policy perspective and decisions is my values have not changed. You mentioned the Green New Deal. I have always believed, and I have worked on it, that the climate crisis is real, that it is an urgent matter to which we should apply metrics that include holding ourselves to deadlines around time. We did that with the Inflation Reduction Act. We have set goals for the United States of America and by extension the globe around when we should meet certain standards for reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, as an example. That value has not changed. My value around what we need to do to secure our border, that value has not changed. I spent 2 terms as the Attorney General of California prosecuting transnational criminal organizations, violations of American laws regarding the illegal passage of guns, drugs, and human beings across our border. My values have not changed. So that is the reality of it. And 4 years of being vice president, I'll tell you, one of the aspects to your point is traveling the country extensively. I mean, I'm here in Georgia. I think somebody told me 17 times since I've been vice president in Georgia alone. I believe it is important to build consensus, and it is important to find a common place of understanding of where we can actually solve problems.
On that note, you had a lot.
All right, Chase, what do you got?
Harris's response seems to go off track quick and become circular because she's avoiding a direct answer. She's repeating herself, jumping between topics, and dealing with the pressure of a live interview, which we don't see a lot of. And I think by focusing on our values without thinking, without really linking them to the question, she ends up sounding like she's talking in circles. And you throw in some tangential denials, and it's easy to lose the main thread of what's going on here. And instead of directly answering why something might have changed, she keeps emphasizing these values. And Harris jumps from one topic, or Vice President Harris jumps from one topic to another, like a climate change to travel history, and it makes it feel scattered and confusing to people. And she seems focused on not alienating anyone, so she avoids taking a strong stance, and this can make her answers feel vague and unfocused. And from a visual perspective, it looks like there's some notes or something on the table she's having to refer to. I have not seen the whole video, which I think might seriously scare people if there are notes needed for questions like this. There's a chance she's maybe talking down to the table, but I don't think that's the case. We've seen her looking at notes many times before. She pauses when she does. We're seeing that here. And her hand gestures not matching up to her speech in any way, but this is baseline for her. I've never seen anybody speak that way, but it is her baseline. She's also using redundant statements and phrases that maybe inflate the length of time that she's speaking. And that's also in her baseline. And we're the behavior panel. So in each of these videos, I'm going to share a weapon of the psychological and social dynamics that influence voting behavior, especially in the context of politics. So number one, identity ties. Our political beliefs are woven into who we are, our identity. When we support a candidate, it's like we're endorsing a part of ourselves. And this makes it incredibly challenging to acknowledge when a candidate does something silly or crazy, because it feels like questioning ourselves, our own identity. So the move being played in politics right now is an effort to replace ideas with identity on both sides of the table. Mark, what do you got?
Yeah, so just to build on what Chase is saying there, if you already know how you're voting, whether you're red or blue, I think those are the colors involved, which team you're on, you're probably going to like or dislike some of what we say because it won't match up with your feeling about what your values are and who you are. In fact, one of the things we could do is take the candidate from the red team and give them a blue banner, and you might find out that you actually start agreeing with them once they're under the right banner. There's nothing wrong with that. It's okay, because the people who run these elections know that you do that, and know that if you're in certain states and you're doing that, you just don't matter. We know some states are already won or lost by the red or the blue team. We'll come in a couple of videos' time as to what those states are according to Kennedy at the moment. But just, as we're going through, just think to yourself, if you're in one of the swing states at the moment, and we'll hear which ones those are, and you don't quite know, you're the most interesting people to a candidate in this election. Now, Kamala Harris at the moment is really not speaking to the opposition. She shouldn't be caring about the opposition. If you're on the opposite side of this, you should be going, well, this is terrible. This is horrible. I don't like this, because this message is not for you. In fact, you're not even tuning into that channel, probably, so you're not watching this. She's interested in her base, those that will vote for her, to activate them, to make sure they go out and they vote. As you'll hear from Trump later on, he's got some base that aren't voting at the moment. He needs to activate them. She still needs to activate her base. She needs to do that in the right way. She also needs to activate the swing. So here's what she does. The interviewer here says, look, square this circle for me of changing your mind. You've changed your mind, square this circle. She gives her two options. Is it experience or is it running for presidency that's caused this? Harris does the right thing here, which is to chunk up to values, not to answer the question, to go to here's what hasn't changed, my values, okay? And then drops down from that into climate. That's for the base. That's a message for the base, but then spins from climate into border control, which is for the swing vote. The swing vote are interested in border control. So I would say, though, to some it might go, well, where she's not answering the question, where's she going? She's going in exactly the right direction for her base and the swing vote. Now, she then lands on the idea of consensus and then lands on the idea of commonplace. You're going to hear that word from her a lot. Commonplace, common sense. The idea of bringing people together. Will she do that or not do that? I don't know. But it's the idea of that. The swing vote want the idea of people being brought together in consensus with a sense of common sense. And she nails that pretty well. I won't comment on the body language much through this, apart from probably one place, because it's more interesting for me what ideas are getting put across to you, the potential swing voter, and what that might do in your mind and how skillfully actually all of these people are at changing your mind or influencing your mind on this. Scott, what do you got on this one?
My wife is a private investigator, and I asked her, how do you find out so much information about these people you're looking into? And she said, the internet, Google. And that's because data brokers sell your information to scammers, spammers, and anybody else who wants to target you. Your full name, your email address, your home address, your health records, your relatives, it's all out there. That's why I've been using Aura, the sponsor of today's video. Aura shows me which data brokers are selling my information and automatically submits opt-out requests for me. I don't have to do anything. So I used Aura to find out how many of these data brokers are selling my information. I couldn't believe it. Cleaning up my information not only helps reduce the amount of spam I get, but it helps protect me from hackers who could use that information to help them get access to my social media accounts, bank accounts, or other sensitive information. Aura also does so much more to protect me and my family from online threats I can't even see. With Aura, I get other features like antivirus, VPN, password management, parental controls, identity theft insurance, and more without having to download a bunch of apps. It's really easy to use, especially for somebody like me who's not a technical person, and I get everything for one affordable price. You may have one or two of these tools already, but not having Aura is like locking the front door but leaving the back door wide open. Aura is always on, doing the hard work keeping me safe so I can focus on other things and not have to worry about all that kind of stuff. I value my privacy, and I value yours. You can go to aura.com/TPP to start your free 2-week trial. That's aura.com/TBP. And there's a link for that in the description below. I think this is great because this is your wheelhouse, man. So even right then, I learned a lot about what's happening because I'm not good at politics at all, not even a little bit. So I think I think we're lucky that you're here doing that. So there, now I kiss your hand in for a minute and see how that feels. Huh?
I love it.
You like that?
On.
You like
Carry
that?
on, Scott. Checks in the post, by the way.
Thanks, man.
Yeah.
I got the Venmo earlier. I'll call you.
All right.
So what I look for in things like this is what's missing from the body language, their baseline that I've seen beforehand. And so what's missing from Kamala is that laugh, the big laugh and the big smile, that whole locking up and getting your, that eye lock and making you and almost making you agree with her as she backs off with that laugh. That's gone. We're not seeing that here anywhere. Or the big smile. She does a little smile, but it's not the one she's famous for. And then as she's juggling these concepts and these sentences and these oddly structured sentences, I think that's why she's looking at the table a lot, Chase. I think that's what she's doing because she's trying to remember what she's prepared while she's talking. I mean, we're seeing this in real time. She's got bullet points. I think she knows she's got a hit. But I think she's trying to remember what those are. And if you'll keep an eye on Walls while we go through this, I watched the whole interview, the whole 18 minutes or whatever it was of it. And he's constantly going over, you can see the inner dialogue on him. You can almost plug something to his head and listen to it. He's thinking about his answers because I'm pretty sure he's got an idea of what what Dana is going to ask him. So, but I think she's looking at the table and looking around because she's trying to remember what she's supposed to say out of those bullet points. She's moving around and speaking very slowly. Sometimes she does speak slowly, but this time she's speaking slow. Everything is super clear. It's like she wants to make sure she gets everything across the way she wants to. And she gets that head shaking in there because if you're communicating, you're talking to someone, as you talk with them, you start doing this, they'll start doing that too. And she doesn't have that classic I'm listening thing happening where that one ear forward like that and some concern a little bit in there every now and then. She does get a tiny bit of concern here and there, but she doesn't really lock up with Dana when she's answering these questions. So that got me thinking. And this bit about sitting at this table, she looks tiny. She looks like a tiny little thing. Maybe she is. I don't know. I've never seen her in person. But she's sitting next to a guy who's pretty big fella. And this does not bode well for her confidence, I would think personally, or looking like a powerful person. That's going to be the most powerful person on the planet. That makes her look odd. I know Greg has a description of that I found amusing. But I'm not going to take it. I'll let you do it, dude. So I haven't seen any body language so far that says she's confident. I see that I hate to say false confidence, but I think she's trying as hard as she can to look like the person she's supposed to be, or the people we're supposed to see her, the person we're supposed to see her as. And I think that's why we see those little flashes of worry and fear on her face as we go through this. They're actually micro expressions of fear we'll see. Maybe I'll pull some out and throw them up here if I get time during editing. If not, then they won't be there. But that's what I'm seeing pretty much in that. Greg, what do you got?
Yeah, a few things. First of all, I'm going to start off by saying her face is as expressive as Robert De Niro. She does a lot of facial expression. So we got to be careful not to assign meaning to some of it that's just there. If you ever watch Robert De Niro with all those movements he does with his brows and stuff, she has that much movement, not identical movement. The other one is she bobbles her head a little bit, but I'm going to leave part of that alone because when you bobble your head, there's culture. And her mother's from India. I don't know exactly which part, so it could be left over from that. It's part of her baseline. She used it all the time. So those are places I'm not. No, it's her mother.
It's her mother?
She's a doctor. Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Her mother's a research scientist, doctor. Yep. Her dad was a lead professor. Yep. Jamaican. Okay. But yeah, so.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
What's interesting about watching her here, I'm going to tell you that she does some brilliant turns here. There are a couple of things that I think are absolutely brilliant. I'm also going to tell you what I don't like. The brilliant thing is when she's asked about flip-flopping, she turns it not to values. The values is a brilliant piece, except for it causes me to want to ask the next question. But what she does is anchor that in a value that she really does have and talk straight to her base about climate change and about the environment. It becomes the single most important thing she says, including even saying, we took the the Inflation Reduction Act and turned it into the Green New Bill. Well, that's a bold statement to make in front of people who are not your base, because that's ammunition for those guys. Look, you've hijacked something that you were giving the American public, but she's quite okay with saying, those are my values. What is interesting to me, and what I've said out loud many times, is if a person tells me one thing on Tuesday, another thing on Thursday, and then tells me it's because of their values, but has no illustration of values. They can tell me what they did in the other place, but not about the things they flip-flopped on. Now I have a question. Because the question was, why did you flip-flop? When she goes to talk about the border, she never answers the question, not once, about the border. She dances around the border, and Chase gives you a resume statement about she's been a prosecutor, has nothing to do with the border, nothing whatsoever. If you'd close a border, you wouldn't have that whole thing. So she doesn't answer that question. So for me, there's some brilliance in here in sticking to her base, in inflating that. But when she starts to get to this point where she then has to use something, she chaffs and redirects and gets away from the topic. I think she loses me there. Let's see what else is here. A couple of others. You guys have covered most of them. First of all, guys, if you're angry with your friends because they're voting a different way, grow up. I'm sorry. Just grow up. That's ideology. We don't hate each other. And I guarantee if we got into political discussions, there would not be identical from the four of us. It's just one of those things. Don't hate your friends. Chase, you're hitting on it about how people get manipulated. I'll tell you, I led change in corporate America for 20 years. And I think there are three levers that you can use to make change. One is hope. Hope causes people to be enduring and tolerate and wait. And I see a lot of that in this speech, and I'll talk about that in just a minute. Another is trust. You either are going to work within the system or burn it down. And that's the way you manipulate how fast people work and how they work within or out the system. And then the other is compassion. How well you know other people will lead you to act less radically. So use some compassion when you're dealing with your friends, because this is a chaotic time in America as we go through these. And Mark, you hit it. People are going to call us out and say, bam, 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 you're this or you're that. Okay, I'm not going to say I don't care, but I can't control it. So here you are. What I heard in here, climate matters are my priority. That's what I heard. I didn't hear anything about the other things she flip-flopped on. And I think, to your point, Mark, she's also talking to Dana Bash, who is on CNN, who is her constituency, and I think she's talking to her base.
Generally speaking, how should voters look at some of the changes that you've made, that you've explained some of here in your policy? Is it because you have more experience now and you've learned more about the information? Is it because you were running for president in a Democratic primary? And should they feel comfortable and confident that what you're saying now is going to be your policy moving forward?
Dana, I think the most important and most significant aspect of my policy perspective and decisions is my values have not changed. You mentioned the Green New Deal. I have always believed, and I have worked on it, that the climate crisis is real, that it is an urgent matter to which we should apply metrics that include holding ourselves to deadlines around time. We did that with the Inflation Reduction Act. We have set goals for the United States of America, and by extension, the globe, around when we should meet certain standards for reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, as an example. That value has not changed. My value around what we need to do to secure our border, that value has not changed. I spent 2 terms as the Attorney General of California prosecuting transnational criminal organizations, violations of American laws regarding the illegal passage of guns, drugs, and human beings across our border. My values have not changed. So that is the reality of it. In 4 years of being vice president, I'll tell you, one of the aspects, to your point, is traveling the country extensively. I mean, I'm here in Georgia. I think somebody told me 17 times since I've been vice president in Georgia alone. I believe it is important to build consensus, and it is important to find a common place of understanding of where we can actually solve problems.
On that note, you had a lot.
They demonize you a lot. They make a big deal out of the fact that you said you're only going to have to vote one time.
Yeah.
You, like me, you're only going to have to vote one time ever, or whatever your quote was.
You won't have to vote anymore, my beautiful Christians. I love you, Christians. I'm a Christian. I love you. Get out. You got to get out and vote. In 4 years, you don't have to vote again. We'll have it fixed so good you're not going to have to vote.
You know why that was? It said, and with a smile, Christians, for whatever reason, don't vote very much, proportionately. NRA people and people that feel very strongly about the Second Amendment, they're not voters. I don't know why. Maybe it's a rebellious streak. And I said to the Christians, we got to win this election. If we win this election, I'll straighten everything out in less than 4 years by a lot. Then you don't have to, it doesn't matter. In other words, I'm saying you don't have to vote. Doesn't mean we're not going to have elections. You're going to have elections, but you have to vote this time because we have to win. This is the most important election in the history of our country. But you're right. They took that. You only have to vote. I say, vote this time. Get us in. Once we're going to fix the country, and it's not going to be important for you to come, and we're not going to need you voted. But we need the votes now. Christians have to get out and vote. Gun owners don't vote, relatively. They don't vote. And gun owners have to get out and vote.
So you didn't mean vote me in once because I ain't ever leaving. You're meaning this is an important one. Vote this time.
Of course that's what I meant. And I said it, and everybody knows I said it that way. And everybody agrees that I said it that way. I don't know if they have it. I hope they have it on tape, but if they don't, but I've heard they use that a little bit. But what they use a lot was, I'll be a dictator.
Day one, you said I'll be a dictator for one day.
But they leave that out. And sometimes when they do add it, they don't say why. And I said jokingly on Sean Hannity, who's a great guy, I said, no, Sean, I want to be a dictator for one day because I'm going to get going with drill, baby, drill, and I'm going to strengthen the borders to a level like you've never seen. I only want to be, and after that, I'll never be a dictator. So I said it nicely. I said, one day, because I want to do the energy and I want to strengthen the border, one day. And it was said with a chuckle, the audience laughed, I laughed, we all laughed. But they take it and they cut it. And then they cut it. And it says, I want to be a dictator. These are very dishonest people that we're dealing with. Very dishonest people, bad people.
Greg, what do you got?
Yeah, in the beginning, this is Trump 101. This is Trump's baseline. Let me also say, whether you're a fan of Trump or not, you can't say that he hedges because he doesn't know how. That's my opinion, at least. I don't think he's good at hedging. I think he's over the top, often to his own detriment. But you see, this is Trump 101. He starts off with that fingers together, doing a little adapting as he's uncertain of the question. Then he starts to talk about demonizing part of his message. I don't know whether it's true or not that Christians don't vote as often. I think the Second Amendment thing, he's hedging there is the only time I see it. When he says people who do the Second Amendment, there's a pause in him talking. And that is odd. That's not something that he typically does. He rattles along and does it pretty well. He's not deceptive or off baseline when he says this thing about Christians. It's the same way he talks about his hotels. If you ask him about his hotels, they're huge. They're this, they're that. He's doing all the same things. If anything, I think this guy gets himself in trouble because he'll say things. Now, they may not always be true, but they're what he thinks most of the time, I think is the case. He conditions that gun owner statement's the only reason I think it's true. Listen to that pause. You guys will hear it if you go back and hear it. You can hear a couple of beats. He's got that sarcasm mouth at, I'm going to be a dictator, bugling his lips. And that's disapproval, in my opinion, but it's his specific style. And there's congruency in his illustrators. At sometimes they leave it out. He puts his hands over there. So he's saying what he thinks. I think Dr. Phil, because of the nature of the relationship, is doing a trusting style question like Dana Bash did with Harris. And I think he's getting what he expected. Then he does some emotional eye accessing, and he lowers his tone of voice and his cadence as he talks about that being a dictator for a day. I think that is an actual real emotional response. And you can take it for what you want. I think this is Trump 101. This is baseline. This is him delivering what he needed to say and what he believes. Mark, what do you think?
Yeah, exactly. So just as in the last video, when the interviewer offered Harris, 2 outs on it, experience and running for, why have you changed? Why have you flip-flopped on this? What Dr. Phil's doing here is framing this whole thing with demonization and making a big deal out of it. So he's offering a framework that's light and that's positive towards the person being interviewed. Just want to call that out in both cases. In both cases here, it's, as you're calling it, Greg, it's a trusting way. It's a positive way of trying to get the person to speak within a very positive frame. So offers demonization and a big deal. But interestingly, Trump reframes it again. He doesn't take that. He goes, well, they said end with a smile. So basically he goes, they said entertain them, end with a smile, make them feel good. So he puts a frame around it of everything that I was saying is about causing that audience to feel good. And again, he talks about that he wants to activate that vote, wants to activate the NRA vote and the Christian vote, because his belief is, or the data that he has that he's based this belief on, is that they don't get out and vote. He's got to activate them. Now, to be clear, he does say with great clarity, doesn't mean we're not going to have elections. We're going to have elections. He's very clear about that. Now, that is comforting to his base as well. Let's suggest that his base isn't for dictators at all. His base want a democracy as well. They want a little less government, maybe, but it's still lesser of a less government, but a democratic one still. And so that comforts his base there. He says clearly, we need votes now. So he's telling us exactly what he's doing there. He's trying to get votes right now, not votes from any of the opposition. They're not swing. He's trying to activate the voters he already has and the ones that he worries he doesn't have. And maybe some of the swing as well, maybe, because he frames again at the end that he said this jokingly. So again, he frames with entertainment. He's had end with a smile up front, jokingly at the end, and then he pivots immediately to energy, to oil energy. That's good for his base. Okay, exploiting the U.S. Oil for its own energy, so it's not dependent on anything else. Great for his base, and then he swings to border control on that. So just as we saw in Kamala Harris, we've got him going from one thing to another thing to another thing. Now, if you're for him, you'll go, well, that's very sensible. If you're not for him, you'll go, but he's going all over the place. You'll accuse him of the same thing that you might have been accusing Harris of. They're both doing the same thing, which is to hit the base first of all, and then swing to the pivot to the potential swing vote, which is border control. Still good for the base as well, but we know that the swing vote are concerned with border control potentially as much as the base might be. So just like Harris, from my point of view, the interview question was set up very much the same, very positively, and they both do pretty much the same thing of reframe, swinging and pivoting to get their base and then to get their swing vote. Chase, what do you got on this one?
Yeah, totally agree. Trump's on baseline here. He evades the real spirit of Dr. Phil's question. And he's using these accordion gestures here. He's so famous for, but he's more likely to do this when he's stressed about something based on my analysis. Dr. Phil has to pin him down on the intent of what he was saying. He's got to do that. And you'll notice this confident steeple. And Greg talks about this and what it means when it goes down like that pretty often. He now has his hands balled up, which when we teach negotiation, this is a sign of collapse. And I teach something called a composure pendulum, which is a concept that helps us understand how we react in different situations, especially under stress. So if you imagine a pendulum swinging two extremes to collapse and posturing, collapse is when we shrink back mentally and physically to please others or avoid conflict. And it's like being overly apologetic or submissive. Posturing over here is the opposite. And it's when we exaggerate our importance or try to dominate a situation, usually to impress somebody or intimidate somebody. In the middle of these two extremes is composure. This is the sweet spot where you're in full control of yourself. When you see somebody who spends a lot of time posturing rather than collapsing, like President Trump, when you see shrinking behavior, collapsing behavior, like we're seeing in his hands here, it's more significant. And I think he regrets saying that. I think what we're seeing is him wishing that he didn't say that on camera. And we're seeing a very stark contrast to the willingness to talk about issues, actions, and ideas. Trump is comfortable actually saying his intentions out loud. The actual intent is there instead of here's a bunch of ideas that I'm going to throw out there. He goes into thesaurus mode at the end of this clip here, and this is done pretty regularly. It's a rhetorical method where you say similar words to describe the same idea, and he says bad people and dishonest people. It's a common rhetorical technique. And he's expressing regret would have done him well here, saying, I regret saying that, absolutely. Even because I knew that when I said it, it's going to be misconstrued and construed and twisted by the media. Tip number 2 here, the social mask. Politicians, like all of us, wear a mask of some sort to project a certain image out there. Voters are drawn to candidates whose masks resonate with their own values and aspirations. And even if they suspect it's all a performance, they don't care. Voters don't care that it's all a performance. And this is a powerful reminder of how appearances really sway decisions. Greg, what do you got?
Oh, it's me.
Oh, yeah.
I'll tell you what I got.
Other Greg.
I got almost nothing after that. That from you guys. I had 14 points. I'm down to 6 now. So I think coming out of the gate, this is all classic Trump body language we're seeing. However, this is the first time I've seen it so mellow. Instead of being on a 10 where he's doing all the stuff, he's on a 3 here, which I think is fine because he's not worried about Dr. Phil. He's not worried about an ambush in that situation. There's that. Then I know, but the thing about Dr. Phil, he's still got that look on his face like this could go bad for you. You know, you got to watch it. We've seen him do that. And so I don't think he's being put on notice or anything, but still, I think he's not afraid of an ambush. I think he's fairly relaxed, really relaxed in this as far as that goes. His illustrators, everything he's doing, it's the classics, but they're all on point. Every time he makes one, they're all on point. His head nods are where they should be. His head shakes are where they should be. His voice volume is fairly soft here, and his tone's fairly soft, sometimes almost whispery as he's talking. We don't see that grimace that we're used to seeing when he's talking to big crowds. So that's not there. I think he's just making his points, and he's such a pro at questions of being asked something and sitting there cold, just going with it, that he's not worried. So I don't personally see any stress on him other than what you guys were talking about, the little things, and nothing's out of place for me in this. I don't see any negativity. I don't see anything that shows deception, anything out of the 14 I have. That's only 6 I had left. So there's that. All right, we good?
Have you guys considered one thing? This is her first time speaking in this role. So she has to politic more than they are having to politic too. She's got to be, I think, because it's the first time anybody's seen her. Now, what impact that has, who knows?
Yeah. Nobody's coming in. It's okay.
They demonize you a lot. They make a big deal out of the fact that you said you're only going to have to vote one time.
Yeah.
You, like me, you're only going to have to vote one time ever, or whatever your quote was.
You won't have to vote anymore, my beautiful Christians. I love you, Christians. I'm a Christian. I love you. Get out. You got to get out and vote. In 4 years, you don't have to vote again. We'll have it fixed so good you're not going to have to vote.
You know why that was? It said, and with a smile, Christians, for whatever reason, don't vote very much, proportionately. NRA people and people that feel very strongly about the Second Amendment, they're not voters. I don't know why. Maybe it's a rebellious streak. And I said to the Christians, we got to win this election. If we win this election, I'll straighten everything out in less than 4 years by a lot. Then you don't have to, it doesn't matter. In other words, I'm saying you don't have to vote. Doesn't mean we're not going to have elections. You're going to have elections, but you have to vote this time because we have to win. This is the most important election in the history of our country. But you're right. They took that. You only have to vote. I say, vote this time. Get us in. Once we're going to fix the country, and it's not going to be important for you to come, and we're not going to need you voted. But we need the votes now. Christians have to get out and vote. Gun owners don't vote, relatively. They don't vote. And gun owners have to get out and vote.
So you didn't mean vote me in once because I ain't ever leaving. You're meaning this is an important one. Vote this time.
Of course, that's what I meant. And I said it, and everybody knows I said it that way. And everybody agrees that I said it that way. I don't know if they have it. I hope they have it on tape, but if they don't, but I've heard they use that a little bit. But what they use a lot was, I'll be a dictator.
Day one, you said, I'll be a dictator for one day.
But they leave that out. And sometimes when they do add it, they don't say why. And I said jokingly on Sean Hannity, who's a great guy, I said, no, Sean, I want to be a dictator for one day because I'm going to get going with drill, baby, drill, and I'm going to strengthen the borders to a level like you've never seen. I only want to be, and after that, I'll never be a dictator. So I said it nicely. I said, one day, because I want to do the energy and I want to strengthen the border. One day. And it was said with a chuckle. The audience laughed, I laughed, we all laughed. But they take it and they cut it. And then they cut it. And it says, I want to be a dictator. These are very dishonest people that we're dealing with. Very dishonest people, bad people.
Do you feel like you may very well be the one that selects the next president of the United States by your influence?
That's possible, but I would have, if I had stayed on the ballot in the swing states. And what I've done, Phil, is we're taking my name off the ballots in 10 states that are swing states. We're leaving them my name on in the red states and the blue states, so people can vote for me without consequence. You know, they're not going to be scared. Oh, the bad guy's going to get elected. You know who's going to get elected in those states. So it allows people to vote for me who want to vote for me without any consequence. But what we recognize from our polling is that if I stayed in the race, it would have almost certainly swung the race to Vice President Harris, who was trying to throw me off the ballot in all the states. Ironically, I thought that would not be a good outcome because I differ with her on all the issues, war and censorship, chronic disease, and many, many other issues. I didn't think it would be right to give the election to her. And our polling from the beginning showed pretty consistently that if I got out of the race, 57% of the people who were supporting me would vote for Trump. And so me staying in the race would have swung the race, very likely could have swung the race to Harris. And so just getting out of the race, I think, makes it a fair race between them. And then
you're close to double digits in some of these swing states.
Yeah, I am.
And if 57% of those people go to former President Trump, that's a real boost to him. That's a real boon to him.
It is. Our decision, or my decision about what to do, I think is, it's much more likely that President Trump will get elected.
So you do acknowledge that?
Yes.
And you have enough that you agree with him on priority-wise that you're more comfortable with that than if it went the other way? Even though you've grown up
Even though I grew up in the Democratic Party and, you know, I had the same kind of orientation towards abhorrence for, I'd say, President Trump as many Democrats, maybe, 4 years ago, mainly because of his environmental stances, which I continue to disagree with. But my conversations with President Trump were very amiable. And he talked about starting a unity party, about President Lincoln and his team of rivals. And I could come in and support him because of these existential issues, censorship, war, chronic disease, that I feel strongly about, he feels strongly about, and that Kamala is on the wrong side. That I could continue to criticize him on issues where I don't agree with him. And he was very comfortable with that. And I like that too. I don't, I'm not gonna co-sign a lot of the things he says and endorses, but on those issues and on the border, I'm with him.
Mark, what do you got?
Okay. So right at the start of this, again, Dr. Phil frames this in a really positive way for this particular candidate, or I guess at this point, kind of saying he's not a candidate anymore and is passing over his power, his votes, because Dr. Phil puts forward a frame of power. You are the person that could essentially decide who becomes president. Dr. Phil could have put across, you're the spoiler vote, aren't you? Which would be another way of putting it in a very negative way. Because, from some people's point of view, and a reality, there's two realities here. One, he could be the most powerful person in the election. Two, he could be the most annoying person in the election because he's what we call a spoiler vote, somebody who's going to stop somebody else winning by stripping votes from them. So what does he come forward with on this? That this is an existential issue for him, for the country. It is puncturing the very existence. We could all die if this doesn't get sorted out because of censorship, war, and chronic disease. He feels that Trump feels strongly about those things: censorship, war, chronic disease, and Kamala is on the wrong side of this. As he quotes. Okay, he then goes to, and really so, and Dr. Phil later on joins in on this by going, you're more comfortable with that than if it went the other way. So both are putting forward this frame of a lesser of two evils choice. Essentially, a lesser of two evils choice. It's interesting that Dr. Phil uses the idea of that. Doesn't go you're more comfortable with Trump. He goes, you're more comfortable with that than you are if it went the other way. So kind of nebulous around that, but dehumanizing in some ways and not naming the name of the person who is that and this over here. Now, one piece of body language in this that really stood out for me, and I think I know why, which is he says, I've taken my name off some states. So he's decided to run in some states and he's taken his name off other states where he thinks he would be the spoiler vote in, so he can have some power and transfer his power. But at that point, there is a spike in his off his baseline, a lot more blink rate going on there. Something else as well. Lots of fluency. There's lots of fluency there and a spike in the blink rate there. Here's why I think he knows that isn't quite accurate. That hasn't necessarily helped. There's taking your name off the ballot and then whether your name actually goes off the ballot. And they're two different things. So in some swing states that he's taken his name off the ballot, his name hasn't gone off the ballot. In some states, they've gone, okay, we'll take it off. In some, he's trying to take the state to court. In some, people are lobbying that it'll stay back on there. There's a lot of argy-bargy around this, and some of it is going in his favor and some isn't going in his favor. But just because he's said, I've taken my name off the ballot, doesn't mean that people can't still vote for him. And that's a bit of a problem. So I think we see that spike there because what he's saying there is not quite accurate, to your point, Chase, as to the spirit of what he's trying to get across. The spirit is, have you transferred all your power? He's gone, I've taken my name off the ballot. Well, that isn't the transfer of power. That isn't exactly true. That's all I got. Oh, by the way, just so you know, he's taken his names off Arizona, Florida, Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, South Carolina, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Texas, Wisconsin. So that would suggest, if he's accurate, that if you live in those states and you're a voter in those states, you're a very powerful person right now as to the presidency. So now that's if his data is accurate, and we don't know whether his data is accurate.
You know what you are, Mark? You're hounded to death every 2 seconds.
Yeah. They've all got your number. They've all got your number.
Everybody does. Yeah.
Greg, what do you got on this?
I guarantee you, every time I pick my phone up and it buzzes, about 80% of that's going to be a text about fundraising or who you're voting for or something, because I live in Georgia. And it is one of the most important states in this election, apparently. You heard Kamala Harris say she's been here 17 times. Why? I don't really know. But okay, I don't understand politics the way you do, Mark. So, of course, the more times you come here, the more it's primacy, the more people identify with you and that kind of thing. So there's value. Let's talk about Kennedy for just a minute. I ran into him once. I was saying to the guys in the airport, and this speaking is the way he talked to his staff around him as they moved around him. You know, he moves his hands, he talks, and just big movement. He's got inner voice, meaning his eyes go down to his left as he's thinking about how to describe this, what's going on. And Mark, 100% with you, exactly what you said. There's a spike of uncertainty when he's talking about taking his name off the ballots, because he doesn't control it. He can only say, take it off. Agreed. I saw that. I also saw him using big illustrators and hand movements. Even though he's in internal voices, he's thinking about that strategy. There's congruency as he talks about swung the race, and you see him move his hands, swing off to the side. We'll talk about sometimes somebody being out of frame illustrating. It's not what this is. He's saying it would swing it. And Chase, you call it body narration, using his whole body to tell the story. His chin is up. His throat is unprotected as he talks about his relationship with Trump, and he even leans back in the chair a bit. I think that probably is true. There may be a little bit of something going on, who knows? But I think their relationship in general is probably pretty good. And then when he said on the border is the only place I saw anything odd. When he said on the border, we share commonality on the border, he does a tongue jut. Really odd. The only time I've seen it out of all the stuff he does. So is there something they don't agree on? Don't know. But we know what his causes are. We know what his passion is. We know what he's talking about. And I think what he does really well throughout this entire thing is he makes it about ideology, not about a person. He doesn't call people scumbags. He doesn't call people names. He says, yeah, that ideology that she supports, I don't support. Trump is closer to me. We don't agree on everything. It's ideology. Remember, politics is nothing but ideology. Chase, what do you got?
Yeah, totally agree. And definitely saw the tongue jut thing today too, right at the border part of this, the border discussion. But everything here for RFK is within his normal baseline, whether he's speaking at an event or at a podcast. This has been his baseline for videos. You can go back 15 years and find videos. His movements are fluid. Everything looks to be within his normal baseline. I spent a long time looking for behaviors that would be relevant this morning in the clip. And there's nothing that I can sincerely comment on that is indicative of avoidance or deception or of, more importantly, perception management. It's just not happening. So let's get to tip 3. Human beings are inherently tribal animals. So we gravitate towards candidates who feel like they're part of our tribe or social group. And this tribal connection can really overshadow a candidate's authenticity, and it makes us overlook their flaws in favor of something that in the psych world we call group loyalty. That's all I got. Scott?
All right. The only other interview I've watched was the Joe Rogan one. So one thing that's missing from this one are those big illustrators he's got that are way above his head, not just right in here, but way above his head. So he doesn't have those, but he was talking about somewhere he's really excited. But I agree with all you guys. This guy's not worried about a thing. He's just relaxed and talking. I think he's a great communicator. But the interesting thing for me was his glabella, these little muscles, this little group of muscles right here, how they go in and out really, really quickly as he's talking. They come in and out. I can't do it that fast. But they come in and out really, really quickly, and it happens quite often. So I thought that was interesting because I don't think I've seen that on somebody before. And this is, let's see, sorry, I lost my place here. I'm trying not to cover the things you guys covered earlier. But I think this is a great example of confidence. I think the way he's sitting back in the chair, the way his illustrators are smooth, nothing's jerky. Sometimes they're big, sometimes they're small. He's not trying to sell anything, in other words. He's a politician, but he's not having to be a politician during this, I don't think. So I think it's really fascinating. And Dr. Phil gets into that classic I'm listening thing, gets his head forward a little bit, gets that ear this way, and looks at him, and every now and then shake his head a little bit. And you can see Kennedy fall into that and mirror him on that as well, because he gets that head sideways and starts talking too. So I think he's engaged. I think he's a great communicator. And I think this is a great example of somebody who is this, everything. Some people you meet are like this, but they're not politicians. But you look at them and go, man, that guy, everybody likes that guy. I wonder why that is. And they like him because they're not selling anything, but they're charismatic. And I think that's what's happening here. So I can see why so many people are into him, because he's got the charisma thing going. His voice is a little odd because of the problems he had with that. But once you get past that, everything seems really good on this guy. Really good.
Dr. Phil did that same look to us at dinner together. Yeah. And we're not immune to it. It made us go, oh, yeah, we would keep talking. We would keep answering questions and stuff just because of that little.
Yeah. Because you know why that is, though? Because I thought about it. I thought about it today when I was watching this, or this morning. It's because when he's talking to you, you've seen him before where it went wrong for somebody. they were talking right along. He just lets them just get all this rope out and just start making a little noose and and then he says, just bang, and then it's over at that point. So I think psychologically that we've seen that, and we've seen it go wrong for so many people when they're talking out of school, or they're saying something they shouldn't be saying, and he nails them on it. I think that's what it is.
Yeah.
So, because I got that feeling too.
Do you feel like you may very well be the one that selects the next president of the United States by your influence?
That's possible, but I would have, if I had stayed on the ballot in the swing states. And what I've done, Phil, is we're taking my name off the ballots in 10 states that are swing states. We're leaving them my name on in the red states and the blue states, so people can vote for me without consequence. They're not going to be scared. Oh, the bad guy's going to get elected. You know who's going to get elected in those states. So it allows people to vote for me who want to vote for me without any consequence. But what we recognize from our polling is that if I stayed in the race, it would have almost certainly swung the race to Vice President Harris, who was trying to throw me off the ballot in all of the states. Ironically, I thought that would not be a good outcome because I differ with her on all the issues, war and censorship, chronic disease, and many, many other issues. I didn't think it would be right to give the election to her. And our polling from the beginning showed pretty consistently that if I got out of the race, 57% of the people who were supporting me would vote for Trump. And so me staying in the race would have swung the race, very likely could have swung the race to Harris. And so just getting out of the race, I think, makes it a fair race between them. And then
you're close to double digits in some of these swing states.
Yeah, I am.
And if 57% of those people go to former President Trump, that's a real boost to him. That's a real boon to him.
It is. Our decision, or my decision about what to do, I think is, it's much more likely that President Trump will get elected.
So you do acknowledge that?
Yes.
And you have enough that you agree with him on priority-wise that you're more comfortable with that than if it went the other way? Even though you've grown up
Even though I grew up in the Democratic Party, and I had the same kind of orientation towards abhorrence for, I'd say, President Trump as many Democrats, maybe 4 years ago, mainly because of his environmental stances, which I continue to disagree with. But my conversations with President Trump were very amiable, and he talked about starting a unity party, about President Lincoln and his team of rivals. And I could come in and support him because of these existential issues, censorship, war, chronic disease, that I feel strongly about, he feels strongly about, and that Kamala is on the wrong side. That I could continue to criticize him on issues where I don't agree with him. And he was very comfortable with that. And I like that too. I don't, I'm not gonna co-sign a lot of the things he says and endorses, but on those issues and on the border, I'm with him.
What are you going to do day one with these countries that have gotten into our country illegally, between ports of entry? What are you going to do with those people?
We are going to have a mass deportation of criminals, immediately the criminals. Our Border Patrol, ICE, and local police know every one of them. They know their middle names. They know them like I know you, okay? They know them very well. They know the bad ones, and they know the ones that aren't so bad. But the local police have to be given their authority back because we're in a crime-ridden nation now. We have, if you take the top 25 cities, interestingly, they're almost all run by Democrats. Cashless, bail. You don't have to put up any cash. You're a murderer, and you get caught, and you leave. You don't have to put up cash. There's no bond, no nothing. It's crazy what's happening. It's almost as though they hate our country and they want it to fail.
If these people are rounded up and deported, then this will be a massive process because we're talking about a lot of people.
And what they'll do is they'll pick out of the 100,000 people that will have to go quickly because they're, murderers, prisoners from tough places. And these are tough people. These are not like babies. These make our criminals look like nice people, nice guys.
All right, Mark, what do you got?
Yeah, this is really, really interesting. So this is a classic attack that we get here and spun into attack. Listen carefully to the question that Dr. Phil asks there. What are you going to do with these countries that have gotten into our country between ports of entry? So this is really specific about other foreign nationals not getting in necessarily directly on, let's say, the Mexican-American border, but on another border and then through Mexico and then through that border. That's what I would suggest Dr. Phil is talking about here. What Trump does is not answer that question because that's a foreign policy question. He spins into domestic security and then into domestic essentially domestic violence, really, the security of your homes, whatever state you're in, what's happening in your home, near your home right now. We're in a crime-ridden nation now, he says. We're in a crime-ridden nation. So he's gone from, so what do you think we need to do about these other countries? To you're in a crime-ridden nation right now. So what I love about this is the imagery. It's cancerous, it's infestation, it's vermin, it's disease, it's invasive species, it's ridden. You live in a crime-ridden nation now. So images speak better than any stats that you could put forward. What he could have put forward is, look, here are the stats at the moment around, how big crime is in the country. Now, the stats wouldn't have gone well for him because the stats don't speak to that. Wherever you go for the stats, they just don't speak to being in a crime-ridden nation. But the reality is, what a great image to worry people about. And then he goes for a brilliant Democrat attack, which is they hate our country and want it to fail. Now, you might love Trump or you might hate Trump or something in between, or you might be indifferent to him. But you've got to admit, they're really, really strong, clear images and super strong attacks. And when you're not the incumbent, your only route really is to attack the other side as hard as you possibly can. And that's been seen election after election after election, not only in the US, but across the world as well. If you're not them, you have to be not them. And so this was a brilliant not that attack. Scott, what do you got on this one?
All right. Trump knows exactly what he's going to do day one. He doesn't need to prepare for this. He's already been thinking about it. This is already in he's got this down the bag, ready to pull out and go, there it is. So he's ready for this. And he stays relaxed while he's relaying the information, but you can hear him speeding up a little bit. His voice gets a little bit higher because he's excited to tell what he's going to do. And then we're seeing all the classic Trump telling you the way it is stuff at this point. We're seeing the illustrators, they're there, but they're light and they're small. And he leans in, he gets that eye contact with Dr. Phil as he's doing these things, right? Because that's the way he connects when it's one-on-one. And he doesn't have any fidgeting. His blink rate pretty much stays the same, so there's no rise in stress. There's, like I said before, there's a little excitement there, but you have to really be paying attention to see that there's excitement there and it's not stress. I'm not saying, hey, everybody can tell, but that's what's happening because it looks a little bit like stress, but I don't think it is. And we're not hearing any of those sniffs where he goes, or those deep breaths, none of that stuff where the frustration is building or the anger as he's talking about something's building. We don't see any of that stuff. We're hearing any of that. And then he ends with that, they want it to fail. He's pulling his jacket closed. He adjusts his seat a little bit and his feet come up and sit back down. And that says, I'm done. That's it. As he continues to look at Dr. Phil. So that's what I'm seeing body language-wise. Greg, what do you got?
So I'm not going to cover all the same things you just covered, but Mark, I'm going to tie back to something you said. If you're the incumbent and you're institutional, you want hope to be a thing that causes people to hang around, believe in, and wait. if you're the guy challenging it, hopelessness causes people to get out, vote, and drive. And that, I think, is what he's doing, whether it is psychologically intentional, whether he's doing it because he has an instinct, whether he believes. I'm not going to argue any of those, but for just a minute, think about Kamala Harris and where she's at right now, has not spoken to the public. And the longer she can delay having to speak to the public, the better chance she will have. So if she can convince people that hope is an important part of her strategy, that causes people to be more patient. I've used it in corporate America over and over and over. People will sit around and wait for something to happen as long as they have hope that something's going to get better. The minute they lose hope, they will turn to action. And that's exactly this message. This is a beautiful crafting of that message. And, Chase, I think you're the guy who said Trump intentionally speaks the way he does. I think that's true. And I think he speaks to people in a language they understand. This is baseline. This is the way he always talks. You just went over all the same things, from doing the air accordion. I think you called it that, Mark, the first time, or squeezing the melon.
I actually called it something. Monkey symbols, which was
monkey symbols,
a little less polite, I think.
What you can pay attention to Trump about is when he is less emphatic, his hands are down between his knees because he trusts Dr. Phil. He's sitting there across from him. When he gets emphatic, his hands come up and he starts doing the monkey symbols thing, as you would refer to it. And he says what comes to mind, what he believes. Whether that's true or not, that's a whole different story. We're not looking at statistics in this show. We're not going to say this is a fact, this is a fact, and this is a fact. What we are going to say is he's preying on something that is a drive that a lot of people, I live in Georgia, and there's a big case at the University of Georgia where a young student was killed by a guy who had gotten it through the border. So he's talking to those swing state voters specifically when he's doing that. And so this is a brilliant piece of hope in one direction, hope in the other direction. I think you need to pay attention to it. The two visions are so very different. I don't think you need to be worried about, Mark, to your point, the blue and the red. I think most red voters are not going to go, that's it, I've had it, I'm going to go vote blue. He's talking to people who don't know where they're voting. Chase, what do you got?
Yeah, I agree with y'all. Great points. What we see here is a direct answer, an explanation, and relating to the interviewer. So the whole answer is within Trump's baseline. He's using emotional hot words, comparison, the thesaurus method that we talked about, metaphor, and a few other rhetorical devices and techniques throughout here. It's actually a good piece of work. When somebody gets to be higher up in business or politics, in my opinion, they develop these skills almost by accident. So when somebody is charismatic on top of this, they can win people over a lot easier. His stance on this is maybe misaligned. I think he could do better not to trigger the lower end of Maslow's pyramid, which is our safety survival stuff. But he's got a pattern of go big or go home. So I don't think there's any reason to think that there's deception here. This is just classic Trump. Tip number 4 here, the media is a master at crafting narratives, and they're so good that 99% of people think that they're not controlled, that their behavior and thoughts are not controlled by the media. That's how good they are. So they can elevate a candidate up to hero status or cast them as some villain, all through just storytelling. And this manipulation can hack into our identity and really steer our behavior and thoughts without us even realizing that it's happening. So I will tell you, the more aware you are of this, the less vulnerable you are to it. So somebody who says, I would never be manipulated, those are the people that are the easiest to manipulate because they don't believe it's real.
What are you going to do day one with these countries that have gotten into our country illegally, between ports of entry? What are you going to do with those people?
We are going to have a mass deportation of criminals, immediately the criminals. Our Border Patrol, ICE, and local police know every one of them. They know their middle names. They know them like I know you, okay? They know them very well. They know the bad ones, and they know the ones that aren't so bad. But the local police have to be given their authority back because we're in a crime-ridden nation now. We have, if you take the top 25 cities, interestingly, they're almost all run by Democrats. Cashless, bail. You don't have to put up any cash. You're a murderer, and you get caught, and you leave. You don't have to put up cash. There's no bond, no nothing. It's crazy what's happening. It's almost as though they hate our country and they want it to fail.
If these people are rounded up and deported, then this will be a massive process, because we're talking about a lot of people.
And what they'll do is they'll pick out of the 100,000 people that will have to go quickly because they're, murderers, prisoners from tough places. And these are tough people. These are not like babies. These make our criminals look like nice people, nice guys.
Do you have concerns about the integrity of this election coming up?
I do. Democrats today are very angry at anybody who questions the election integrity. He shouldn't be. In 2001, every Democrat believed the election was stolen from Al Gore, by the Bush administration. In 2004, I wrote an award-winning article for Rolling Stones talking about the theft of the 2004 election. Nobody called me unpatriotic. It's a fact. We need to be responsible civically, and everybody knows any machine can be hacked. What safeguards do we have in place to make sure that's what we should be talking about, instead of getting angry at people for saying, elections can be hacked. Let's talk about how we fix the system. We put a man on the moon. We have ATM machines on every block that never get hacked. We have, you came from Las Vegas this morning. That entire city is built on machines that can count right and never make mistakes and never give you too much money back. And so we can do it. And you need paper ballots. You need something to check the election. And that's what we should be talking about, rather than did this one get hacked or did that one.
Well, they've used lawfare to keep you off the ballots.
Yeah, exactly.
That's another challenge. It's not just technology. Sometimes it's just flat out assault and using the court system. It's already affected this election by keeping you off the debate stage and off ballots. So it's already been affected, in my view.
Yeah, I believe that I would have won the election if it was the old kind of elections that we used to have, with a primary where people could run if they wanted, where they had fair counts, where they had open debates. What happened with me is we had to do something that was considered insurmountable, which is to get 1 million signatures. And we did it. We had 100,000 volunteers in 50 states. They were working 10-hour days. They were working in blizzards and blazing heat. And every time that they would show up at the Board of Elections with these giant piles of boxes filled with, thousands of signatures, the next day we would get sued, and we would be in front of a Democratic judge, and the lower court judges would hold against us, and then we'd have to appeal it, and we go up and we get it reversed. We won every case ultimately. But that should not be part of the system. That's not really democracy.
All right, Chase, what do you got?
There's smooth movement, steady cadence, direct answers to questions here. I'm like sitting here thinking the comments are going to think that I'm biased. So I watched very closely, trying to find, I was nitpicking on this, trying to find negative things. So there was some appearance of no bias here. And I'm genuinely not trying to be biased at all. I watched for subject changes, misdirection, hesitation, loss of fluency, stress, emotionalizing, covert persuasion tactic, and even RFK's signature postural retreat, tie straighten move that he does when he's stressed out. He leans back and does that. There is one postural retreat, and that's only during the time that he's trying to convey a message and make it relatable to Dr. Phil, where he says, "You just came from Las Vegas." We see one true emotion revealed here, and that's contempt. But he's showing that contempt when he's speaking about the justice system being weaponized. RFK has a history of pitching ideas from an underdog perspective here, from an underdog story archetype, if we're looking at the Joseph Campbell archetype stuff there. And he's doing that. And he's doing that here with what I think is no deception. And if we move into tip number 5, relatability wins. We naturally favor people who seem more relatable, who mirror our own experiences and our values. They show flaws. People who show flaws even a candidate isn't entirely honest. If they're relatable, it can make us overlook all of those shortcomings because they made us feel understood, secure. He's just like me. Greg, what do you got?
Yeah, the only stress I saw at all is when he asked the lawfare question. When Doc asked the question about lawfare, hey, they prohibited you from being in the debates, they prohibited you from being on the ballot. You do see a little bit of stress. You see his blink rate increase, and he leans in. Uncharacteristic to your point, because he leans back often. I think that's just a recognition before he starts to answer the question. But it's probably a sore point as well, as you can imagine. He takes I'm like you, Chase. I don't want to, be biased towards who's here. And look, he's not also on the grid being asked hard questions about his, what kind of policies and that kind of thing. He's just going to talk about why he did what he did. He's rational, middle of the road, what's good for America. Again, not demonizing the person, not agreeing with their ideology. And I always say, just like religion, politics is ideology, and you're not going to change somebody's mind with a barb or an insult. It just doesn't work. You have to convince them through other means, and I think he's taken that approach. But I see his baseline is congruent. There's nothing contradictory here, nothing that's causing discord or stress. Is exactly what I had in my notes, except for that one thing. And then he goes to internal voice as he talks about how he could have actually won an election. You see his hands illustrate and away from his body, pushing way out. And Chase, my one note here says, Chase once said opening and closing are a good way to think about honesty and dishonesty. I think that's a good question, a good way to state it. And we see all that away from his body movement, pulling back in when he's talking about the people and collective and that kind of thing. Mark, what did you see?
Look, it's a lot less stressful when you're not running for president anymore or you're not president. It's like a lot less stressful. And to your point, Chase, of the underdog, it's ironic that anybody who's a Kennedy would ever consider themselves the underdog in any situation. That's quite extraordinary. I once had a client who became prime minister and went grey within 2 weeks. 2 weeks is like, that stress. Stopped being prime minister a number of years afterwards and suddenly became a way better communicator, way better, because just the amount of stress was just way, way less. Look, what I love about this is there's the frame here of electoral integrity. And as I've just put forward there, this candidate who's not a candidate anymore is in a very different situation. He's doesn't have to do like Trump's doing the not that. As we're going to see Harris do, he doesn't have to do the this. In this case, he's going to do comparison, the this, not that, or this versus that. And so I'm going to just string out for you the stack of things he puts into his argument of images, the stack of images for it should be this and not that, or this versus that. So electoral integrity. An election should be fact, safeguards, fix the system, fair counts, open debate, and checked. Like, it's very hard to argue that, isn't it? Okay, very hard. And he puts, if you listen to him talk, he puts down all those lovely images there. Versus hacked, mistakes, insurmountable, blizzards and blazing heat, great piles, and court against us. Like, who wants an election like that? Again, great stack of images that he puts forward there. And, coming, to everybody's point, coming very naturally to him, possibly because he doesn't really have to think too much now about getting anything right for any voters anywhere. He can just say how he's seen things. And so we get this lovely stack of what democracy should be like versus what it shouldn't be like. Great images from him there. Scott, what do you got on this one?
I'm gonna have to go with you guys on this. I think he's a great communicator. I like this guy, and it's going to sound like I'm being biased as well. And that's horrible to come right out and say that, but his communication style is perfect. He's leaning forward when he comes in. He sticks that hand out and he's pointing, and almost like he's going to reach in and touch Dr. Phil. These are all classic great communicator moves when you're doing that one-on-one communication. He's got that down. And when he's reaching forward like that, man, that's tough to pull off if you're not good at it. Because quite often when someone does that, they'll stick their hand forward. This kind of looks goofy and uncomfortable. Not with him. He's got to figure it out. So and when someone does that, it keeps you engaged and focused on them as well when it's a one-on-one conversation there. I don't feel like he's playing to the camera. I don't feel like but like you were saying, Mark, I don't think he's got all that stress on him from being, in the game right now. But he's got all the other charismatic tools that he uses when he is in the game. And he's just talking, using them. That's what people say about Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton could do that, and he didn't sound like he was in the game. That's why people just love the guy when they talk to him. So the whole world disappears except for you and Bill Clinton. So I think he's got a little bit of that on him as well. And for me, this is like the ultimate communication style. If you could teach somebody what this guy's doing, man, that'd be the ultimate there. So
put them in front of a camera their entire life. It helps.
That's true too. That
Scott,
really is.
I think in your state, you can probably still vote for him. I think he's probably still on the bill. So you can vote for him and it won't make any difference to the result because that's why he's still on the bill. There, you've got your man.
That's true. I don't know. I got somebody to vote for already.
Do you have concerns about the integrity of this election coming up?
I do. Democrats today are very angry at anybody who questions the election integrity. He shouldn't be. In 2001, every Democrat believed the election was stolen from Al Gore, by the Bush administration. In 2004, I wrote an award-winning article for Rolling Stones talking about the theft of the 2004 election. Nobody called me unpatriotic. It's a fact. We need to be responsible civically, and everybody knows any machine can be hacked. What safeguards do we have in place to make sure that's what we should be talking about, instead of getting angry at people for saying, elections can be hacked. Let's talk about how we fix the system. We put a man on the moon. We have ATM machines on every block that never get hacked. We have, you came from Las Vegas this morning. That entire city is built on machines that can count right and never make mistakes and never give you too much money back. And so we can do it. And you need paper ballots. You need something to check the election. And that's what we should be talking about, rather than did this one get hacked or did that one.
Well, they've used lawfare to keep you off the ballots.
Yeah, exactly.
That's another challenge. It's not just technology. Sometimes it's just flat out assault and using the court system. It's already affected this election by keeping you off the debate stage and off ballots. So it's already been affected, in my view. Yeah, I believe that I would have won the election if it was the old kind of elections that we used to have, with a primary where people could run if they wanted, where they had fair counts, where they had open debates. What happened with me is we had to do something that was considered insurmountable, which is to get 1 million signatures. And we did it. We had 100,000 volunteers in 50 states. They were working 10-hour days. They were working in blizzards and blazing heat. And every time that they would show up at the Board of Elections with these giant piles of boxes filled with, thousands of signatures, the next day we would get sued, and we would be in front of a Democratic judge, and the lower court judges would hold against us, and then we'd have to appeal it, and we go up and we get it reversed. We won every case ultimately. But that should not be part of the system. That's not really democracy. I mean.
So you have been vice president for 3.5 years.
Yeah.
The steps that you're talking about now, why haven't you done them already?
Well, first of all, we had to recover as an economy, and we have done that. I'm very proud of the work that we have done that has brought inflation down to less than 3%. The work that we have done to cap the cost of insulin at $35 a month for seniors. Donald Trump said he was going to do a number of things, including allowing Medicare to negotiate drug prices. Never happened. We did it. So now, as I travel in the state of Georgia and around our country, the number of seniors that have benefited. I was in Nevada recently, a grandmother who showed me her receipts. And before we capped the cost of insulin for seniors at $35 a month, she was paying hundreds of dollars, up to thousands of dollars a month for her insulin. She's not doing that any longer.
You maintain Bidenomics is a success?
I maintain that when we do the work of bringing down prescription medication for the American people, including capping the cost of the annual cost of prescription medication for seniors at $2,000, when we do what we did in the first year of being in office to extend the child tax credit so that we cut child poverty in America by over 50%, when we do what we have done to invest in the American people and bringing manufacturing back to the United States so that we created over 800,000 new manufacturing jobs, bringing business back to America, what we have done to improve the supply chain so we're not relying on foreign governments to supply American families with their basic needs, I'll say that that's good work. There's more to do, but that's good work.
I want to get to...
All right, Greg, what do you got?
So here we go. Chaff and redirect. When I say chaff and redirect, I mean you spew out information for somebody to pick up an idea. When they pick up on that idea, you immediately move away. It's like a plane dropping things for a missile to follow. She chaffs away from the actual question about the economy and the situation and back to Trump. Why? I don't understand. I mean, we're talking about 4 years ago. I get it. That's basic politics. And Mark, you're going to talk about it in a big way. But she was artful at one thing. She gets away from talking about the actual issue and goes to a tangential issue so she can actually elaborate and say some words. And what is really interesting here is, the word salad thing that we always say she does, she's not doing as much here. So she's got a cadence that is normal. You can understand what she's saying. There's a lot of filler words, but she flatly refuses to answer that question about Bidenomics. Just flatly refuses to answer it, just avoids it. She does that chaff and redirect, moves on down. And then I hear an oops. I said earlier, Trump, when he hit the Second Amendment, guys, there was a 2-second to 2-beat pause as he was thinking about, should I have said that? She goes, I hear an oops when she says in the first year. My guess is she's been coached by somebody like Mark who says, for God's sake, stay away from first year, second year, third year. Just talk about now, because you're associated with everything that's happened the minute you say in the first year. And I think that's what I see. And you can't miss that she stutters for just a second there. Maybe I'm reading a little too much into it. So, Mark, what do you think?
Look, the general rule is that when you get in, you do nothing in your first year because that's your free ride. And that's across, it's not just America, or if you're on the red team or the blue team, it's just a general considered thing. Do nothing in your first year because you're the incumbent and you just need to sit in the chair for a bit. And also, don't put any stats forward, because in the first 90 days, they can go, well, you said you would achieve this in the first 90 days, and you haven't. So put forward an idea like hope, because you can't measure hope. One of the ideas is that one of the failures of Hillary Clinton was to put forward the economy as and what she would do with the economy. And ultimately, that was a no hope, because that's ultimately testable. You can go, look, the economy was this. You said it would be this. It isn't. You failed. So I would say that's why she's doing the ups there, is she's moving into breaking a bit of a cardinal rule. Anyway, what does she do? Which, from my point of view, as somebody who helps people like this do this kind of spin, and it's really effective because we win, and enough of you vote in this way that we win. Whichever side you're on, whatever spin we do, enough of you vote, so one of the politicians get in. Whichever way you vote, a politician is going to be president. Okay, that's the way it's gonna go for you. So what does she do? Well, Trump has done not that. He has to do that. He has to attack, not that. RFK has done this versus that. He's in a very special position to be able to do that. She has to do this. And here's how she does it. Here is the stack of images. Recover. So she starts off recover and then capped. So it's back on its feet, and now we've stopped something. We've capped it. And then this is brilliant. The work has been done. We did it. When we do the work, when we do what we did, when we do what we have done, that's good work. I mean, that is a rule of, that's like a rule of, what do we got? We got a rule of 7 there, which is fantastic. Rule of 3, like rule of 3 is for amateurs. Rule of 7, that's when you're into the strong rhetoric. For my mind, look, You might like her. You might think she's fantastic. You might hate her. You might be indifferent to her. Yeah, I don't care either way. I don't get a vote in your country, okay? I just don't.
You might.
Well, no, I don't. I don't. No, I can't. Actually, I can't. I can't. So, no, I can't. You can try that one. Oh, it's all going. Oh no, it's all going to hell. Yeah, no, I can't. I can't get a vote. Okay. So, but whichever way it goes, that's a really nice piece of rhetoric. That's really nice. And here's the thing. Because whatever side you're on, whether you're going, that Trump must go down or that Harris, she must go down. If you want those people to fail, you must never underestimate what they're doing that's really good. And if you've taken a side, you will underestimate. You'll go, they're rubbish. They're terrible. They're good. Both of them could get in. They're both good. And are they brilliant? No, neither of them are brilliant. They're good enough. They're just good enough. They're the best you have. They're the best you put forward, okay? And they're good enough, and both of them stand a good chance because they both have the tools. That was brilliant tooling on that one. Chase, what do you got on this one?
I think we could take a Charles Manson monologue and you could find something brilliant inside of that.
That was similar, actually, that last one. Similar.
This is one of the biggest redirects I've ever seen. And I hope Scott can overlay a video of what chaff looks like coming out of an airplane. That's all I could think of coming into this. There's a postural retreat away from the interviewer, which is Kamala's right side. And there's hesitancy. There's a prolonged pause. When Vice President Harris is in a corner, there's a tendency for her to revert to this method that she's using here. And you can see it in almost every interview where there are difficult questions. And I'll admit, this is a pretty hard question, especially for where she's being interviewed right here. But Vice President Harris uses a 3-tiered method here when she's in trouble. Trump has a 1-tiered method that we talked about already. And here's the method that you're going to see in this clip when it comes back on. Number one is there's 4 steps, actually. Is a redirect to a list by using a phrase. And the only phrase you need to say is, first of all, or let's start with. Those 2 phrases that start a list. Second technique, begin to list challenges to overcome. Let's talk about the challenges that we have to overcome. Step 3, detail a list of accomplishments and achievements that you're proud of. And step 4 is storytelling with an example. This one is something that Trump also uses, this step 4 here. This is the classic 4 steps that have been done in so many interviews. And this is a technique that's either A, worked for her a lot in the past, or B, has been trained into her so well that she's kind of got this down. And this happens 2 times. She does this 2 times in this one clip. So let's get to tip number 6. This is the firewall illusion. A lot of us believe that we're just totally immune to persuasion. We think we can see through all the facades. But this overconfidence is a trap. It is a trap, and it makes us more susceptible to influence because we underestimate the power of persuasion tactics on our own life. Us thinking we're invincible says, I don't need to worry about it. I don't need to pay attention to it. So those people who think I can't be manipulated are absolutely the best targets. And this goes for psyops or anything else. And that's all I got. Scott, what do you got?
All right. Well, right out of the gate, she talks about how proud she is of the economy. I personally haven't seen the economy get any better, but she talks about that. So I think that might not have been a good move for her, coming right out talking about that. And then I've got to do stuff y'all haven't done. Seen lots of that bobblehead, but again, that could be a cultural thing. It's not blatant. It's not like the whole classic bobblehead we see all the time, but it's in there. So that might be from being raised with, by an Indian parent. And then we see little flashes of contempt and anger as she goes through this as well. They're not big, but they're in there. She makes so many, like you guys were talking about, so many facial expressions, so many changes in there. In between those, though, we're seeing some of those flashes of contempt as well as anger. And then she tries to pull an Obama in here, which she shouldn't have done, because she tries to tell a story. And she goes off talking about the bus and Georgia. Then she gets into this little old lady she met. And where did she meet her? in Nevada recently. She shouldn't be doing that because Obama can do it, man. He could tell the story, but I don't think that happened to her. She shows nothing that shows that that's sincere really happened. That's the classic setup story that you hear politicians tell, is that thing. You meet an old person or you meet a child or a man with this problem and you help solve that, something you did help solve that problem. So that was a little bit iffy there for me. So I think she's looking at the table a lot, again, because she's trying to remember these points she's trying to make. You know, like when the story came up, you grab people's attention by telling the story. And a great politician, when they start talking, you don't even realize they're telling one. But she says, you know, all right, here's what happens. Here's the beginning. And here's what happened in the beginning. Her setup is weak. The story part's kind of weak. The concept is good, but she can't make it pay off for her. So, and then she talks about how they cut child poverty by 50%. You know, I don't know where this 50% is. It's not in the hollers and hills of Kentucky. That's for damn sure. And in Appalachia and the little mountain towns in Tennessee, it's not been cut by 50% there. I know that. So I don't know what she's talking about. I don't know what, it just sounds like it might be something she's just making up to make her sound like something's going on. They may have put policies in place and all those kind of things. And what I'm trying to say is she's not following those up to make sure that's actually happened. Maybe she's been told that and believes it. That could be possible. But I think this will be I'm not going to say a deep cut in the future to look back what her body language was showing us as far as the deception goes, because I think maybe somebody's told her that these cuts worked or that they're in play, and she doesn't know for sure. When you're dealing with entrepreneurs, you see that a lot too, when they're talking about financials. You'll see an entrepreneur, you know, whoever the CEO is, just spouting out these numbers and stuff. But when you ask the financial person questions, it's a completely different story. They'll say the same things, but their body language will tell you differently. And I think that's what's happening here. Because I don't think she's sure what's going on with the child poverty thing here at this point. All right, we good?
Yep.
All right, I'm going to give that one to Greg.
So you have been vice president for 3.5 years.
Yeah.
The steps that you're talking about now, why haven't you done them already?
Well, first of all, we had to recover as an economy, and we have done that. I'm very proud of the work that we have done that has brought inflation down to less than 3%. The work that we have done to cap the cost of insulin at $35 a month for seniors. Donald Trump said he was going to do a number of things, including allowing Medicare to negotiate drug prices. Never happened. We did it. So now, as I travel in the state of Georgia and around our country, the number of seniors that have benefited. I was in Nevada recently, a grandmother who showed me her receipts. And before we capped the cost of insulin for seniors at $35 a month, she was paying hundreds of dollars, up to thousands of dollars a month for her insulin. She's not doing that any longer.
You maintain Bidenomics is a success.
I maintain that when we do the work of bringing down prescription medication for the American people, including capping the cost of the annual cost of prescription medication for seniors at $2,000, when we do what we did in the first year of being in office to extend the child tax credit so that we cut child poverty in America by over 50%, when we do what we have done to invest in the American people and bringing manufacturing back to the United States so that we created over 800,000 new manufacturing jobs, bringing business back to America. What we have done to improve the supply chain so we're not relying on foreign governments to supply American families with their basic needs, I'll say that that's good work. There's more to do, but that's good work.
I want to get to...
In your press conference, you talked about the Democrat Party as though you feel like it doesn't exist the way it existed a generation ago or 2 generations ago, that there's not a Democrat Party as you knew it growing up. Is that an accurate read? Did I hear you right?
Yeah, it still has this kind of tribal identification. But the things that it stood for, like, you know, the Kennedy Democrats, my father, my uncle's Democratic Party was very different. That Democratic Party was anti-war. It was, you know, pro-constitutional rights, pro-civil rights, starting with the Bill of Rights and the freedom of speech. It was on the side of working people and cops and firefighters. It was on the side of the environment, but not just climate change and big, offshore windmills and carbon capture. It was protecting habitat in whales, which it's doing the opposite today. And then it was on the side of Main Street, small business, and it was the opponent of the corporate capture and this merger of state and corporate power, of big money, big data, big tech, big banking, Wall Street. But today, that is the constituency of the Democratic Party. It's the big powerhouses. The cops and firefighters are long gone, and any kind of loyalty to labor is pro forma.
How was it?
All right, Chase, what do you got?
RFK does a classic postural retreat, this lean back, classic stress response when Dr. Phil asks about his commentary on the Democratic Party. He answers the questions directly without any redirecting or cushioning. And I may sound biased here, but I'm going to say that it's not rooted in behavior, because there's nothing here that's different from his baseline, nothing indicating stress, and nothing I can see in any way is an attempt to avoid the questions or the issues. And each of these, I'm also looking to see confidence and certainty. Is someone willing to speak very directly on an issue and have actual beliefs, or are they speaking through wax paper where there's no real answers? From a behavioral perspective, RFK is going after BlackRock and other corporations and calling attention to how they're controlling politics. And it's really unusual that no one's calling him out or disputing that. And President Trump, Vice President Harris are both silent on that issue. I thought that was interesting that from that behavioral perspective there. That's a big claim. So tip number 7, when our beliefs clash with reality, this is called cognitive dissonance. It creates a discomfort. And to avoid this, we might ignore a candidate's flaws or rationalize their behavior to kind of maintain our sense of identity and avoid this mental stress of cognitive dissonance. So cognitive dissonance can make us do all kinds of crazy stuff, including crazy comments on YouTube videos with behavior people. Mark, what do you got?
Yeah, none of those down below, please. Look, here's what happens for me. I'm going to comment now on these next 3 videos really around the themes that come out, the values that come out, just so we might get a hint from these particular videos, what these people may stand for. What's the themes in their life? So the opening frame here is one of a wistful bygone era. You're asked, like, what do you think of the party right now? And he goes back in time. He kind of goes with, things ain't what they used to be. As we'd say in Welsh, not that I am Welsh, but my henwel fenadau, the land of my fathers. Literally for him, it is literally the land of his fathers and uncles. He's aristocratic in that sense. He's descendant from other big lawmakers and rulers. So he has this, in my view, aristocratic, land of my fathers, bygone era, wistful view. So in terms of an election and what he does to us, I would say as a public, is his ideas become retrograde. They go back in time. He says anti-war, rights, freedom, working people, environment, Main Street, that idea of the little guy. Well, yeah, these are all the things that we heard about. They're all the things that made American politics kind of great in our wistful view of the 60s and 70s, which was the land of his forefathers, of his political forefathers, literally genetically linked to them and brought up in that family. So, beautiful, wistful idea. Things aren't what they used to be. We've got to get back to those wistful 60s, 70s idea. But that will never get him elected because it's not thinking forward. Or certainly, if you are running for presidency, you've got to go, look, what we've got right now has worked and we're moving forward. Or you've got to, if you're not the incumbent, you've got to go, what's happening now doesn't work. We've got to scrap all of that. It's a disaster. And not put forward your idea, because your idea will be judgeable. You've got to negate Whoever's in, if you're in, you've got to go, it's working and it's going forward. Again, RFK's in a very unique position where he can go, well, let's think what my fathers and uncles did years and years and years ago. Totally unique situation. Scott, what do you got on this one?
I'm going to have to go again and say he's a great communicator. I really have nothing else to add to what I've seen so far. It's pretty much been the same thing every time. Just fantastic communication skills here. Greg, what about you?
So I'm going to poke back on where Mark started talking about Welsh and the Wales and Wales. He's what he's talking about is Camelot. I mean, referred to as Camelot in America, which is very appropriate for what you're talking about. But what he is doing is undermining trust. He is saying, look, this great shining city on the hill is not what we are. Here's what's happened. Here's the erosion. Here's what's happened. Remember, I said trust and hope are two of the most powerful things. What he has at least espoused in here is compassion. He's not been about the other person being a bad thing. With a flip of a switch, he could turn us to undermining the current system if he's got enough followers. And it doesn't take a lot of followers to start undermining the system. So that trust message is important. And that's exactly where he's approaching. The reason he's talking about BlackRock and food and all those things, those are underpinnings of our society. Wealth, food, all those things that you're talking about, Mark. So there's a big, big macro there in trust. And he's undermining trust, at least on the surface level. Now, that's powerful if Trump gets him on his side as undermining trust and forcing people to action to dismantle this government that he doesn't believe in. That's powerful. That is a powerful message. So wait and see where he goes. If you want to know what his passion is, there's one really good indicator. When he goes to say something about environmental issues, the Democratic Party used to be the party of the environment and habitat and all that. His elbows drop and his body slumps. That's my guess. And I know he's a big environmental guy. I've seen him like on TV with specials about the Grand Canyon, that kind of stuff. But that's at the crux of his matter is the health of the country and the environment of the country. That's all I got.
In your press conference, you talked about the Democrat Party as though you feel like it doesn't exist the way it existed a generation ago or 2 generations ago, that there's not a Democrat Party as you knew it growing up. Is that an accurate read? Did I hear you right?
Yeah, it still has this kind of tribal identification. But the things that it stood for, like, you know, the Kennedy Democrats, my father, my uncle's Democratic Party was very different. That Democratic Party was anti-war. It was, you know, pro-constitutional rights, pro-civil rights, starting with the Bill of Rights and the freedom of speech. It was on the side of working people and cops and firefighters. It was on the side of the environment, but not just climate change and big, you know, offshore windmills and carbon capture. It was protecting habitat and whales, which it's doing the opposite today. And then it was on the side of Main Street, you know, small business, and it was the opponent of the corporate capture and this merger of state and corporate power, big money, big data, big tech, big banking, Wall Street. But today, that is the constituency of the Democratic Party. It's the big powerhouses. The cops and firefighters are long gone, and any kind of loyalty to labor is pro forma.
How is it?
You have less time to make your case to voters than any candidate in modern American history. The voters are really eager to hear what your plans are. If you are elected, what would you do on day one in the White House?
Well, there are a number of things. I will tell you, first and foremost, one of my highest priorities is to do what we can to support and strengthen the middle class. When I look at the aspirations, the goals, the ambitions of the American people, I think that people are ready for a new way forward, in a way that generations of Americans have been fueled by hope and by optimism. I think, sadly, in the last decade, we have had in the former president someone who has really been pushing an agenda and an environment that is about diminishing the character and the strength of who we are as Americans, really dividing our nation, and I think people are ready to turn the page on that.
So what would you do day one?
Day one, it's going to be about, one, implementing my plan for what I call an opportunity economy. I've already laid out a number of proposals in that regard, which include what we're going to do to bring down the cost of everyday goods, what we're going to do to invest in America's small businesses, what we're going to do to invest in families, for example, extending the child tax credit to $6,000 for families for the first year of their child's life, to help them buy a car seat, to help them buy baby clothes, a crib. There's the work that we're going to do that is about investing in the American family around affordable housing, a big issue in our country right now. So there are a number of things on day one.
What about you?
Well, I'm excited about this agenda, too. As I said, the idea of inspiring America to what can be. And I think many of these things that the vice president's proposing are things that we share in values. And the child tax credit is one we know that reduces childhood poverty by a third. We did it in Minnesota. To have a federal partner in this, unbelievable, I think, in the impact that we can make.
Mark, what do you got?
Yeah, I love the opening frame here from the interview, which is basically make it fast. Like do this quick. And that's fair enough, because Harris does need to get this message across quick. As you've been saying, Greg, we haven't really heard from her in any kind of position very much, certainly not this position. So she's got to get the message out quick, and it has to be a message. She's already done the message of we did what we did, and when we done it, and it was done, and it was good, and that's what we did. So she's done that, like this was all good, and that's what we done, and it was good. Now she's got to go forward. She's got to project us forward. Here's how she does it. Strong middle class, new way forward, hope, optimism, opportunity, family, small business. So great ideas that I'm sure all of us, anybody, any stripe you have would go, okay, these are good and reasonable things. But I would say in the grand scheme of world politics right now, there's nothing new about anything that she's saying there. These are stuff that we've heard in every, G7 election over the last few years. So they are things that will get you elected, absolutely, but there's nothing new about that. There was nothing new about what we heard from RFK, which was basically go back to my uncle and my dad's day. That was really good when when the environment was great or we cared about it, and there was no aristocracy who owned all of our money. Well, maybe there was. I think it was your granddad. I think so. Yes, things have changed. He goes back in time. She's moving forward in time, but nothing new, I would say, from her on that. Not to say these aren't concepts that win you an election, because they have and they do. Chase, what do you got on this one?
I agree with you, man. Starts off with facial touching, then goes into a numbered list again. Then list these priorities instead of answering the question. So here's my priorities is the answer, essentially. There's softening language here as well. She says, do what we can and support and strengthen. Like those are very hard to even define. There's an eye contact as she makes this point with a tight-lipped expression. And I'll let you decide in the comments what that tight-lipped expression means when you see it. Still no answer to the actual question. Talks about when I look at the goals and aspirations. When I look at goals and aspirations, that's just words. Then she says people are ready for a new way forward in a way that generations of Americans have been fueled by hope and optimism. Mark, that's another great one, I think. It's no idea at all. And this goes into blaming Trump for the division. The reporter has to ask the question again 2 times just to try to do something here. And Vice President Harris goes back to a numbered list again, and it sounds like it's going to be a real answer. Then she just starts implementing a plan. Then she says she's laid out proposals. No mention of what's in the plan, no mention of what's in the proposals. Then there's a hard, unmissable swallow of stress that you'll see. Greg's probably going to hammer nail on that thing. She says, there's the work that we're going to do that is about investing in the American family around affordable housing. Around affordable housing. I just thought that it's just unbelievable. I sat for several minutes I typed this all out as she was saying it. I read it 50 times, trying to figure out what the substance was in this. I thought maybe I'm missing something. Maybe I did. Let me know if I missed some substance somewhere. I'm happy to learn from that. There's no actual things listed here. She finishes with saying, so there are a number of things on day one, even though there aren't really things. And then Walls jumps in at the end here. He says, let's inspire America to what it can be. That's what he's going to do on day one. Inspire America to what it can be. This could have been a lot more persuasive if there was a mention about anything other than people getting diapers and car seats. And it could have been a great opportunity to answer a question. So tip number 8, really quick. We instinctively trust people who exude authority. A candidate who appears confident or knowledgeable can easily win trust, or as Mark would say, stand out, win trust, and gain credibility, even if they're just skilled at projecting an image of competence. And that's all. Scott, what do you got?
Well, I'm going to have to disagree with you guys. I don't think she said anything here. When I listened to this the first time, I'm sure I look like a pet bird when the phone rings. You know, your head goes sideways and it goes back and forth, because I couldn't figure out what any of this meant. You know, except when she blamed Trump, that made sense. I understand why she's doing that. But like you were saying, Chase, she has to ask, Dana has to ask her the question again. Then her cadence speeds up, her voice cracks. She makes that little clicking noise in there when and she's turtling. The whole thing. She should have been prepared for this. This was a great shot for her to say, all right, well, here's what we're going to do. We're going to do this, and this, and here's how it's going to work. She could have taken all that time. Nobody was rushing her. She had all that time to say, it's what I'm doing day one. But no, I don't know I really don't understand what she said. I don't think I'm stupid. I mean, I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but I think I would understand if what she was saying made sense. So then she's got it's just odd word usage, odd sentence structure. And she doesn't mention crime or the illegals problem we're having, the things that's scaring everybody to death right now. She doesn't mention any of that on day one. I don't understand what's happening here. Greg, what do you got?
She's talking to her base, is why, back to Mark's point, she doesn't want to talk those points because that's not her base. That's not what you want to talk about. You want to talk about hope and all that kind of stuff. Interestingly, Mark, all I could think was a chicken in every pot right out of the gate. You say a chicken in every pot, people get it. But when it takes you 18 words to get to strengthen the middle class, which is a trope. I mean, everybody knows that when the middle class is the core to America. It's what drives everything we do. The wealthy are wealthy only because the middle class spend what they make and move. And that's just the way it is. There's another dozen or so words. Then she gets to that trademark. When she gets to this whole thing about hope, she does another dozen or so words, and she does the trademark Harris, I'm feeling a little stress nod. She starts to nod and smile. And if you go along with it, then she moves right on and she just keeps going. But she makes quick eye contact with you to see. And she does exactly that. The hard swallow you brought out, Chase, there's stress right there. If you don't agree with her, then we get to see it escalate to that cackle. And there's a formula. I'll put it out some other time. But right here, if you pay real close attention to her, she's really smart at even pausing and going to see if you are in agreement with her. And she does it right as she's walking along. Then she goes back exactly to what I said in the beginning, that message of hope. You brought it up, Mark. And then the counter argument, there's Trump, there's hope, and there's Trump. You can't have both. You can have hope or you can have Trump. That part is actually pretty brilliant when you're talking to your base, because she's running on one thing. And that one thing is, I'm not Trump. She's even picked up some of the same policies. So they can now say, look, she's no taxes on tips. Trump said it and she said it. Now she can say, look, we're alike, except for I'm not that. I don't tweet mean things. I don't do horrible things. I'm not going to cause this. I'm not going to do any one of a list of things that cause people to not like Trump. I'll leave that to whoever you are and whatever it is. But when she gets to that day one and you're poked again, I have laid out a number of proposals in that regard. And I'm with you, Chase. I expect then, because she's brilliant at making lists, here's a list, bam, 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 bam. But she doesn't. And she also goes to disapproval mouth, and Mark, she makes a tick. And you say it all the time, that verbal ticking is uncertainty. When you're talking about things that you know that you're going to do that day, you should be shouting it from the rooftops. I mean, chicken in every pot, not chicken in every pot. I'm sure I just got a sound.
Yeah, you didn't get through for you either. Who knows what's going to happen on that?
Thanks, Greg.
To your point, Greg, that diapers and car seats, that swing vote.
Yeah,
when
makes sense.
People first have their kids, they're most likely to swing their vote at that point. So it is pretty brilliant that she talks to the base and the swing vote on diapers and car seats.
That part, you're right about that. I didn't pick up on that. And I think the key here is she's masterful at getting out of when she's feeling stress, but she doesn't show passion for what she's talking about. You know, that's the piece that's missing. And you'd think day one, when I'm president, I'm going to do A, B, C, D. People make promises all the time they don't fulfill. Nobody ever remembers that. That's all I got.
You have less time to make your case to voters than any candidate in modern American history. The voters are really eager to hear what your plans are. If you are elected, what would you do on day one in the White House?
Well, there are a number of things. I will tell you, first and foremost, one of my highest priorities is to do what we can to support and strengthen the middle class. When I look at the aspirations, the goals, the ambitions of the American people, I think that people are ready for a new way forward, in a way that generations of Americans have been fueled by hope and by optimism. I think, sadly, in the last decade, we have had in the former president someone who has really been pushing an agenda and an environment that is about diminishing the character and the strength of who we are as Americans, really dividing our nation, and I think people are ready to turn the page on that.
So what would you do day one?
Day one, it's going to be about, one, implementing my plan for what I call an opportunity economy. I've already laid out a number of proposals in that regard, which include what we're going to do to bring down the cost of everyday goods, what we're going to do to invest in America's small businesses, what we're going to do to invest in families, for example, extending the child tax credit to $6,000 for families for the first year of their child's life, to help them buy a car seat, to help them buy baby clothes, a crib. There's the work that we're going to do that is about investing in the American family around affordable housing, a big issue in our country right now. So there are a number of things on day one.
What about you?
Well, I'm excited about this agenda, too. As I said, the idea of inspiring America to what can be. And I think many of these things that the vice president's proposing are things that we share in values. And the child tax credit is one we know that reduces childhood poverty by a third. We did it in Minnesota. To have a federal partner in this, unbelievable, I think, in the impact that we can make.
Let's talk about this for a second. I've got something I want to bring up with you guys. We have that text chain and Signal that's just us.
Yeah.
When Greg answers something with an exclamation point, are you all for telling him not to use an exclamation point? I can't imagine Greg going, yes. You know what I mean? Exclamation point.
Has he ever used an exclamation point? I don't think I've ever seen
I
that.
saw it the other day he did, and I'm not, it's like seeing you in a t-shirt, Mark. I don't want to see that again. I don't want to, the picture in my head. Can we vote on this?
My exuberance was jumping out.
It sure was. I didn't like it.
A fist bump emoji a couple of days ago, so I'll screenshot that and share it with you.
Nice.
Don't. So can we vote on this? I say no.
I'll send the little smiley face hug and a heart. How's that?
No more exclamation points for Greg. Are we all in on that?
No, I'm with Kennedy. No censorship.
Yeah, free speech.
I'm with you.
But just for Greg.
Just know it might mean something different than you think it does.
Hey, it's a slippery slope, man. It's a slippery slope.
You've been commander-in-chief. She's been commander-in-chief on the border. As commander-in-chief, how would you grade her paper on the border?
Well, I would say an F. I mean, in terms of badness, if you're going to look for how to run a border badly, it's a market study in what you shouldn't be doing. It's the worst border in history. I believe we have 20 million people that came in, and you've heard this before. They come in from jails and prison. They've come in from mental institutions. If you know that, that's your world a little bit, isn't it? and they're terrorists, and they come in from, but they're allowing, other countries are allowing their jail population to pour into our country. They're bringing them here, and they're saying, if you come back, we will kill you. If you come back, we will give you the death penalty. And they're dropping murderers and drug dealers and human traffickers into our country by the hundreds of thousands.
Who's doing that?
The countries are doing it.
What countries?
Some are coming, but the countries are doing it.
Venezuela?
A lot of South American countries, probably all of them. Hey, you do it, so would I. If I'm the president of some country in South America, but anywhere in the world. It's happening now all over the world. They're coming from Africa, the Congo. We had the Border Patrol yesterday. I was there. Border Patrol told me they have, as of this moment, 158 countries represented. Most people don't even know there are that many countries. 158 countries over the last year are represented crossing the border illegally. They're coming in from Mexico. They're coming in from all over the world. They're going through Mexico, and Mexico shouldn't be allowing it, but they are. They didn't allow it when I was there. I was very strong with it. We had a remain in Mexico policy, and if they didn't adhere to it, they paid a price.
All right, Greg, what do you got?
Back to baseline, back to straight answers. You ask Trump a question, he gives you an answer. Now, whether all that's true or not, it might have been something he heard from someone. That's still what he's going to deliver. And his pretty straight answer baseline. He's keenly aware of the camera, but as Mark always says, he's an entertainer because he clocks the camera a couple of times to make his key points. But again, short of RFK, not many people have been in front of a camera their life as much as he has. His coaching actually has stuck, I have a feeling, because at one point, here's a 2-beat pause at if you're from some country, you know what's on the tip of his tongue right there, and he didn't say it. And that's a good thing because that means he has just avoided one of the things that blew him up. And it means somebody is coaching him and he is paying attention. Mark, what do you think?
So opening frame here is a nice, easy frame for him because he's put in a place of authority. Basically, Dr. Phil says, look, you be teacher and you give a grade to her. So he gets the high status position. She automatically gets the low status position. That's going to make him feel good. You know, Trump, it's going to make him feel great. And so he launches into it. Badness, F for fail, badly, worst in history, jails, prisons, mental institutions. Lovely moment there where he says mental institutions and he goes, that's kind of your scene, isn't it, Phil? Phil keeps his head down. Like, I'm not even going to dignify that comment. See, what's great about Trump is he will just say what comes into his mouth. And basically he can't help but lower the status of the person who's interviewing and go, that's mentals, that's your bag, isn't it? So F for fail, badness, badly, worst in history, jails, prisons, mental institutions, terrorists, human traffickers, essentially, and they kill you. So he's going for the images there of an existential threat, extreme superlatives. No, that's what we expect from him. But he's not telling us what he is. He's telling us what he isn't. Now, of course, that's the frame that everybody goes into in these situations. Again, there was nothing unique about RFK. He just went into history. There was nothing unique about Kamala Harris. She just did the tropes that you have to do in order to stand the best chance of winning. And Trump just does the usual thing of just going, okay, attack with superlatives, with extremes. Don't back it up with anything. I mean, that maybe, that you actually know for yourself. Give the figures, but he stays out of figures as he should. You're not going to win with figures. You win with superlatives, with extremes, and in this case, really scaring people. So, good, great, a great example of exactly what you need to do in that position. But again, nothing new about this, nothing extraordinary, nothing that I would go, you know what? Never seen that before. That's amazing. All three of them, standard as far as I can see. Scott, what do you got on this one?
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't think there's anything different in this one than there was in the very first one. We're seeing, he's relaxed, he's delivering well, he's getting his concepts across, he's connecting well. Everything looks like it has the whole time. you know? So if he could grab some of that Kennedy stuff and sprinkle it on his delivery, I think it'd be a whole new game, though, you know? But I think I don't think there's anything new there for me anyway. Greg, what do you got? Or Chase?
Yeah, he tries to tie this mental institutions comment to Dr. Phil, and it's a little awkward there. And then he socializes this issue by saying Dr. Phil would do the same thing if he was in charge of one of these South American countries. President Trump uses his usual method here, and I want to show it to you so you can see it. It's a 5-step persuasion process, and it's perfectly illustrated in this clip. Number 1, target the lower levels of Maslow's pyramid, the survival and safety levels. Second, build and escalate the problem using numbers and figures. Okay, so now number 3, socialize the issue by speaking about the motives of the other parties and how people see it and feel about it, because he's tribalizing you. Here's what the tribe thinks. You should agree with them. Step 4, redirect on how the problem didn't exist during his tenure. And step 5, talk about consequences. It didn't exist because people know that if they did this, I would come down on them, or this would happen to them. So number 9, social proof here. The influence of the people around us is huge. And if our social circle supports a candidate, we're way likely to do that. This herd mentality provides us with a sense of safety in numbers, even if it means supporting somebody that we know is not genuine.
You've been commander-in-chief. She's been commander-in-chief on the border. As commander-in-chief, how would you grade her paper on the border?
Well, I would say an F. I mean, in terms of badness, if you're going to look for how to run a border badly, it's a market study in what you shouldn't be doing. It's the worst border in history. I believe we have 20 million people that came in, and you've heard this before. They come in from jails and prisons. They've come in from mental institutions. If you know that, that's your world a little bit, isn't it? And they're terrorists, and they come in from, but they're allowing, other countries are allowing their jail population to pour into our country. They're bringing them here, and they're saying, if you come back, we will kill you. If you come back, we will give you the death penalty. And they're dropping murderers and drug dealers and human traffickers into our country by the hundreds of thousands.
Who's doing that?
The countries are doing it.
What countries?
Some are coming, but the countries are doing it.
Venezuela?
A lot of South American countries, probably all of them. Hey, you do it, so would I. If I'm the president of some country in South America, but anywhere in the world. It's happening now all over the world. They're coming from Africa, the Congo. We had the Border Patrol yesterday. I was there. Border Patrol told me they have, as of this moment, 158 countries represented. Most people don't even know there are that many countries. 158 countries over the last year are represented crossing the border illegally. They're coming in from Mexico. They're coming in from all over the world. They're going through Mexico, and Mexico shouldn't be allowing it, but they are. They didn't allow it when I was there. I was very strong with it. We had a remain in Mexico policy, and if they didn't adhere to it, they paid a price.
All right. We've looked at these videos, and I'm sure we've all made decisions about what we've seen. Mark, how are things looking to you so far?
Yeah, nothing surprising here. Again, let's reiterate, if you're already on one side, you'll have liked what we said or not liked it. If you're another side, you'll have liked it, you'll have not, depending on what we were saying at the time. So, an interesting thing is to check in with yourself and go, well, how open am I really to any other kind of point of view? Here's my point of view. Here's what I see. I don't see anything new or special from anybody here. We've got the relatively new faces in here of Harris and Trump playing the usual thing of hope and fear. I've seen it election after election after election in country after country after country. It's the standard way of doing it. It does work one of them wins. Okay, one of them wins based on that, and you can't choose another position than that. I've never seen another position work. So hope and fear, and then we've got this kind of interesting but still retrograde old style of the aristocratic style, basically going, it's not how it was with my fathers and my forefathers, and the new thing, the newfangled corporation body is like running everything rather than the old-fangled corporation body, which was my grandparents running everything. There's a beautiful, and what I love about it is there's just a beautiful irony to that of the defunct lord that says, damn, if only if everything was as it was when we ruled it and these new corporations didn't rule it. I love all of that stuff, because you just see it time and time again with aristocracy, which is, the family of the ruling family that get their position by being part of that family. No, never will it change, and maybe never should it. We'll always have that aristocracy around. The only way through is that you have to chop off their heads, and we don't want to go back to that. The English, the French, all gave it a go. And America happened in many ways. So interesting. Chase, what do you got on this one?
We didn't just happen. All right.
We chopped off a lot of heads.
So cognitive dissonance is a weapon. It is a huge weapon. So it's like mental jujitsu move that flips your behavior when your beliefs and reality don't line up. It's not just some quirky brain thing. It's a legitimate weapon that could be used to manipulate and control people without them even noticing. And in our current world of politics and media, it is their secret recipe to get you to completely overlook obvious stuff and then to overstate other stuff on the side that you maybe agree with and stick with your tribe even when nothing really adds up. So we end up supporting stuff that doesn't make sense just to keep our identity safe. But the big kicker is once you truly get how this works, you can start seeing through the smoke. It's mostly about staying sharp, questioning narratives, and making choices that truly reflect who you are, not what somebody else is telling you. The way to tell if you're a victim of this programming is if they got you to judge something based on tribe instead of logic and reason. And it's even hard to see whether or not you've done that before. So keep it on your radar. The game's being played out in Washington, D.C., and it's being played out between your ears. So I only see one candidate willing to take on these gigantic organizations that almost everybody would agree seem to have infiltrated government and don't have our best interest at heart. And I think both sides would agree with that, which is interesting. Greg?
Politics is business, big, gritty, ugly, dirty business. And they're using the same three levers I've used my entire career to make change in corporations. And what they are is hope. As long as you have hope, you're willing to wait, you'll tolerate, you'll put up with a lot of things. If somebody's promised you a raise for 2 years and you're still sitting there, you're a hopeful guy. If on the other hand, you're hopeless, Mark used fear, I use hopelessness because it's a continuum to me. And if I can use hopelessness, I can drive you to move more rapidly. You want things to change now. And you're tapping into Maslow when you do that. So there's hope. We heard hope and hopelessness today. The other one we know about is trust. And trust causes you to either work within the system or undermine and destroy the system. And that will lead you, for people who want big change, will undermine or they'll work through legislation, that kind of thing, to make changes to the system. So we've got both of those playing out. What we're lacking seriously in most politics is compassion. And by that, I don't mean for the other side. If you're a red guy, you're not going to have compassion for blue ideas and vice versa. But what you can have compassion for are the people you know, the people in your life that you talk to every day that you're now not friends with because they believe in this or they believe in that. And your guy did this and your guy did that. And these people don't even know your names. But people you've called your friends and your family for your entire life are being undermined. And they're what's happening by de facto is they're destroying your trust in your neighbors and your friends and your family. Be careful who you surrender that trust to. Scott, what do you got?
I think this was a great example of seeing each one of these people at, I'm not going to say their best, but when we see them when they're in a different situation. In other words, Kamala was in a different situation. She hasn't given an interview or anything. So it's bang, here's your first one. And you talk about whatever you want. So we got to see her where she's not being, attacked or anything, but we're seeing her deliver under that style of stress. Then we're seeing Trump and him go through his thing. We don't usually see him that calm and not worried about being attacked. So I think I think that's significant to know what he looks like when his baseline is rested and when he's not frustrated or angry. And then we have Kennedy, who is not running now. He's just sitting there being the politician and not being in the game. So we're getting to see everyone in this set of videos that is in politics, but they're in a different position or situation than we've seen them in before. So I thought that was really fascinating. All right, fellas, I think this is another good one, and we'll see you next time.